Good morning. I'm sorry that we've had some technical problems this morning with the sound, but we'll try this again. Welcome to the Adult Education and Workforce Development Statewide webinar for October 3rd, 2018. I am Jerry Hafner. Joining me this morning is Maryland and the entire Adult Education team. Thank you so very much for our success stories. Please keep them coming. South Bend's adult education program sent us a very special story about a student who loves his work. As you can see on the screen, this is Dion Brown. He is passionate about food. He started cooking with his mother when he was 6. As a young adult, he landed a job working as a dishwasher for the Holiday Inn in downtown South Bend. He stayed there for 16 years. Slowly working his way up to food preparation, breakfast cook, lunch cook, and finally chef. 6 months later, the company closed its doors and he had to find another job. Unfortunately, the new job didn't last very long. My brother passed away, so I went through a little depression, Dion explained. He lived with me for a time, so every morning I got up, he was there. And every night when I came home, he was there. And then all of a sudden, he wasn't there. I basically shut down and did some stupid stuff at my job and got fired. During this time, Dion's mother also became ill and began to forget things. It was a lot to handle, and Dion says he didn't handle it well. He mostly spent his days smoking marijuana to deal with the pain. His sister encouraged him to get back on his feet, and 2 years ago, she registered him for Brandon Murphy's high school equivalency class. When I first met him, Murphy said he was a little undecided about what he wanted to do. He lacked self-confidence. He wasn't sure how he would participate. But Murphy says Dion's confidence began slowly to grow. He passed 3 of the 5 sections of the readiness test on the very first try, something he didn't expect to do. Dion decided to stick with the class. His plan was to try and get his HSC and then figure out the rest. But earlier this year, Adult Education's career coach at South Bend, Deb Lane, approached him about participating in a culinary class being offered through Cultivate Culinary, a new South Bend community partner. It would help him to refresh his skills, she told him. So Dion signed up. The class lasted 2 months and provided hands-on training in food safety and food preparation. I asked him while I was in the class, the owner, if there were any open positions, Dion said. They help people. They rescue food and they repackage it to give to people who could use the help. In St. Joseph County alone, more than 15% of the residents are food insecure. The organization liked him too. A week after the culinary class ended, he started cooking for employees at the Goodwill Center where Cultivate Culinary is based, helping the chef to plan and prepare meals and clean up. When I get into the kitchen, I usually see what I need to do and I go, Dion said. This initiative and drive has translated to the classroom as well, where he is finishing his HSC. He hopes to earn his diploma by December. His mindset completely changed this year, Murphy said. He's learned to trust his judgment. Now he's a leader in Cultivate, and he's a leader in the classroom. As for Dion, he's thrilled to be working again and to have the opportunity to watch others savor his cooking. I was at a low point, and now I'm back, he said. His teacher agreed. He's found his voice, and he only reaches for greatness. That is a wonderful story. Thank you so much to the South Bend Adult Education Program for sharing. Let's turn to another success story. Let's come to Central Indiana. Margareta Diaz attended ELL classes to improve her English. Struggling with depression, she often wanted to stop going to class, but she noticed that attending school was good for her mental health. She pushed herself to continue in school and was even more motivated after speaking with her child's teacher. I went to a parent teacher conference for my daughter, she said. The teacher told me that my daughter said, "I'm very proud of my mom because she is going to school to learn English." Teacher Brenda Gaston shared that Margarita was an extremely dedicated student. She put in numerous hours to reach her goal. She was always looking to improve herself and help her classmates. She earned her HSE diploma and graduated in June. Achieving the HSE means a lot to me and also to my three children. I feel really proud of myself and I enjoy knowing that I'm able to help others succeed. Best of all, I am able to help my children with their homework. Margareta was inspired by her daughter's words and told herself throughout her time at Warren Township, "I can do it." Her son wrote a note, and you see that note on your screen. Not only has she taken me to practices, games, meets, she still found time to do her homework and managed to get her high school diploma before me. All I have to worry about, her son said, is school and sports, while she has three kids and a husband to worry about. I feel like this was an obstacle that stopped her from doing more things. And now that she has crushed this obstacle, nothing can stop her. And last, I have the honor of speaking to adult education graduates from at Oakland City University, the Wabash Valley Correctional Facility later in the week. And one of the graduates penned a letter, and I want to share part of that letter with you. The letter reads, "The first day I went to school was a joyful day for me. I had been waiting many years to further my education. Studying subjects like social studies and science, in addition to language, reading, and mathematics, became harder for me due to my lack of comprehension in the English language. I recalled a few times wanting to quit. With the encouragement of my teachers and the determination of studying 4 to 5 hours every day made it possible for me to accomplish the task. I remember the day I went to school and got the news from my teacher that I had passed the task test. That day, I felt tremendous joy in my heart for this huge accomplishment in my life. I would like to thank my teachers and tutors for all their help and support. I want to encourage the teachers to continue to teach the way they are teaching. You are doing a great job." Those are three very, very great stories. And again, thank you so much for sharing them. And please continue to share your success stories with us. Let's turn to assessment. On July 1st, Indiana, as well as some other states across the country, began using TABE 11 and 12 to kick off the new program year. Mike Johnson, the National Adult Education Director for DRC, is on the line with us this morning, and he has graciously agreed to talk more about the transition to TABE 11 and 12. Many of you will recall Mike. He's presented many times at IAACE in April, at French Lick. He was there last April and presented about these changes, and I know we look forward to hearing what he has to say this morning. Mike?
Thank you, Jerry, and welcome everybody, and thank you for having me this morning. I wanted to go through some slides related to TABE 11 and 12 and then certainly have some time for questions if we have the ability to do that. I'm just going to start out with a few slides just to let everyone, as Jerry mentioned, kind of where we're at with TABE 11 and 12, TABE 9 and 10 in this transition period. We are moving towards the end of TABE 9 and 10 and then the start of 11 and 12. Also with TABE Class E, just to touch on that, the U.S. Department of Ed has recently extended the NRS approval of TABE Class E. So as we begin to transition to new standards for that, we'll see some changes going forward in the future for TABE Class E. Looking at the high level, and I think most programs in Indiana are starting to understand the changes for 11 and 12, that everything we've done for TABE 11 and 12 relates to the new college and career readiness standards. Also having new test length, and we'll talk about the time of the test here in a moment, but only having one length of the test. You can think of it as the survey if you want, you can think of it as the complete batteries if you want. What we did is develop TABE 9 and 10 to align to the standards requirements from the U.S. Department of Education so that we can get the federal approval. We did not make it longer than it needed to be to gain that approval from the number of questions standpoint. And again, we'll talk about that as we go forward. Having one math test on the new TABE 11 and 12 is a change from 9 and 10 as well. No longer will we have separate tests of applied math and math computation, but rather just a math test, but also having separate parts within that math test for the calculator and the non-calculator, which mirrors what happens with the task test as well for high school equivalency. We also improved the locator by adding 4 questions to the locator. We also added some additional reviews of the locator's cut scores. Near the end of the development of TABE 11 and 12, we had some practitioners, about 16 practitioners, come up to Minnesota for a panel, a working group with our research scientists to review the cut scores for the locator. And I've had some good feedback for programs using the locator with 11 and 12 and having a better placement of students using that locator. Again, the locator is a very short test, so it does need to have the students take that seriously. And if they are not guessing, taking it with a good attempt, the locator is proving to be very effective in placing students into each of the levels. We'll talk a little bit more about the content areas and the alignments to task as we move forward as well in the presentation. The biggest change, and I've covered this in a couple of presentations in the past, is the change from the old NRS descriptors to the new NRS descriptors, and that's the big change that drives the increase in rigor for TABE 11 and 12. And just to point out again, the blue box in the top is what TABE 9 and 10 was aligned to, and this is a specific example for the lowest level, the level 1 math descriptor. So under TABE 9 and 10, we were aligning to a descriptor that was about 1 sentence long. And under TABE 11 and 12, the new descriptor from the Department of Education is 5 paragraphs long. I will focus on paragraph number 3, where it says algebraic thinking. It says students prepared to exit this level understand and apply the properties of operation to addition and subtraction problems, which is very similar to the sentence in the top blue box, but we have to then also account for the other 4 paragraphs and all the red words that I've highlighted, the understand and apply, the analyze and compare, the create composite shapes, use their understanding, explain their reasoning, all these descriptive words that go kind of into the depth of knowledge requirements of the assessment as well. And we'll see that as we move forward. A couple of things that have not changed for TABE 11 and 12 is the foundation of the assessment, and we see that in the diagram on the screen, that students will still enter the program on the top left corner. They take a locator test, will take a pre-test, go through an instructional program, take a post-test, and then may be ready to exit, may go back for more instruction to keep on working towards a goal. But what the U.S. Department of Education has had as their goal is when a student does reach this ready to exit section on the bottom right corner, is that by focusing on the new college and career readiness standards, that the student is better prepared for the next step. Traditionally, I think students may have transitioned right to a high school equivalency step, and that may certainly be the case going forward. But they're also now having students that might be transitioning right into career workforce programs, or students transitioning into post-secondary placement programs. And we're seeing that in many states. Kentucky Community College, Hawaii Community College uses TABE as a placement exam for the community college system. And so we're seeing that the students being better prepared for the for-credit side when they're leaving the adult ed side, not just now for adult ed students, but also for high school students that are transitioning into post-secondary. A couple of other areas that have not changed. The left-hand side column of the chart that's on the screen, we see the levels of TABE still being consistent what they were with 9 and 10. The E, M, D, and A also still having a level L, the literacy level. The letters have not changed, but certainly what is inside those letters or the content has changed based on the NRS descriptors that we saw on the previous screen. When we look at the rest of the chart, we see that item types on TABE 11 and 12 have also changed. We've introduced several new types of items or questions for the test. These have been questions that are used on task, so it is going to better prepare students as they transition from adult basic ed into high school equivalency programs. The first column we see is the EBSR, which is the evidence-based selected response. This is the two-part reading questions, and if you notice the reading section in the middle of the screen, level E has 3 questions that are evidence-based selected response, but level A has 15 questions. So much more rigorous types of questions on level A. Also with evidence-based selected response, those are 2-point questions. And we'll see an example of that as we go forward. A 2-point question also changes our scoring for TABE from traditionally we've always tracked TABE as a number correct kind of score. And now we will look at points possible versus points obtained. And we'll see that when we look at a TABE report in a moment. In the middle of the column for the programs that use TABE online, we will see technology enabled or technology enhanced items. These are items, again, similar to task on the computer, the drag and drop, the matching, the multiple select. So a handful of those items being introduced. These questions allow us to raise the depth of knowledge for the TABE test, and also, again, meeting the requirements of the descriptors from each level of the NRS. Looking at the number of questions on the test, so again, questions versus points, but the number of questions on math and language are 40 questions each. We'll keep level L kind of separate because level L is a little bit different than the EMD&A. But for EMD&A, we see 40 questions for math, 40 questions for language, and 47 questions for reading. Reading does have more college and career readiness standards to cover than math and language, so that's why there are more questions. There are also more reading passages to cover those questions. So more reading involved on TABE 11 and 12 versus the 9 and 10 version of the reading test. The timing of TABE 11 and 12 is a big change as well. We have switched from what TABE 9 and 10 used, which was commonly referred to as required time, to what TABE 11 and 12 uses as allowable time. And the difference there is that under required time, most students used most of the time for TABE 9 and 10. Under allowable time, most students will not use most of the time. We are allowing time for students that may not have been exposed to the new standards, may not have been exposed to new instructional techniques for the new standards. So we're seeing that many students have been prepared for these, and the average times are much less than the allowable times. Looking at reading as an example, and again, focusing on E, M, D, and A, we see that 60 minutes per section of reading. The average for reading is 40 to 45 minutes per section, so 80 to 90 minutes total for reading. Reading has two parts. They are just a continuation from a reading test. There are not two different types of reading tests. So very simply, question 35 may be on part 1, question 36 starts on part 2. So just a built-in break on the reading test between two sections. Again, average time between 40 to 45 minutes on the reading sections versus the allowable time of 60 minutes per section. Language has an allowable time of 60 minutes. The average time is between 30 to 35 minutes. And math has an allowable time of 75 minutes, and the average time is right around 45 minutes for the math test. Math is also two parts for most sections. We see part 1 and part 2. Part 2 is always the calculator portion. The first two levels of TABE, level L and level E, you'll notice does not have a part 2. There is no calculator portion for those first two levels of TABE. For level M, the calculator is a 4-function calculator. For level D and A, it's a scientific calculator that's used for, same calculator that's used for task. If you're using TABE Online, then those calculators are built into the system. If you're using paper and pencil, you would use handheld calculators for that. We are also monitoring the times for students as we continue. We have reduced these allowable times once already since January. We will continue to monitor these times now that more programs are using the paper and pencil test and see if we can reduce the allowable times anymore in the future. Probably not anymore this year, probably look at that in early next year. As Jerry mentioned, many states started in July, so we'll get more data throughout the end of this year. And as more states have begun to emphasize the new standards more in their instructional programs, I think students are becoming more familiar with the types of questions and the types of passages that they're experiencing on the test themselves. Looking at the objectives for TABE, a couple of things to spot out. This is a very high level view of the objectives, and it is available on our website, and I'll point to that as we go forward as well. But math is fairly straightforward, where we see some of the skills in math, some of the domains that are just covered in the beginning levels of TABE, the L, E, and M areas, and then some of the areas of math covered just in the higher levels, the M, D, and A areas. But as we look down in the bottom under reading and language, we see that the dots are covered in all areas of the TABE levels. So as we look at some of those objective areas, it then comes down to the types of questions that you're using, the types of passages. So if we're looking at reading, for example, the third objective area is key ideas and details. That is a objective area that's covered on all levels of TABE. So our test development team that writes the test will need to use the types of questions, more evidence-based selected response at the higher levels, longer passages, more intensive reading passages at the higher levels for those types of objective areas. I'm going to jump over to our website. Hopefully this will work out for us and go to our TABE test website. I'm going to open up tabetest.com. And again, if we have this website open, on the main page, you can scroll down, and whenever you see a purple logo, that's TABE 11 and 12 related materials. And when we look under that heading, we'll notice that there's a link for blueprints under TABE 11 and 12. The blueprints we'll open up and we'll notice that there is a blueprint for every content area and every level of TABE. So I'm going to go ahead and specifically look at the level A of math and open up the math blueprint. And this is a blueprint, and again, there's blueprints for reading, math, and language. So if you're not a math teacher, you can open up the reading or the language blueprints. But if we look at this math blueprint, there are 5 sections of the pie. So math level A covers 5 sections of the college and career readiness domains. We see statistics and probability in the dark blue, numbers and quantity, algebra, functions, and geometry. If we continue to scroll down on the blueprint, the colors of the pie charts are carried down to the left-hand side, and the first one is listed as geometry. In the left-hand columns, we see the numbering scheme for the college and career readiness standards. So if you're really into the standards, you'll recognize the numbers. But we'll focus on the middle column, which is the description of the standard. The first standard under geometry says no precise definition of angle, circle, perpendicular line, parallel line, line segment based on an undefined notion. So if we look at that opening sentence, the key part of that is the very first couple of words that say no precise definitions. Again, this is the level A blueprint, so it's the highest level of TABE. We see on the far right-hand side, this is a low emphasis for TABE 11 and 12, level A. Low emphasis means fewer amount of questions on the test related to this standard description. There's a low emphasis because knowing the precise definition is not a level A targeted skill. It would be a developing skill that would likely be covered on a lower level of TABE. But if we look at the third one down, and we see the third one down says use volume formulas for cylinders, pyramids, cones, and spheres to solve problems. And we see that that is a high emphasis. So more questions related to that descriptor on level A of math. And certainly using volume formulas is a more advanced skill that should be covered at a high level on level A. And we see that as a high emphasis. So as you're becoming more familiar with the standards, you understand how they straddle over many areas. So you may see, and you likely would see, this very first description of knowing precise definitions on the level D blueprint, but it would be at a higher emphasis because it's a developing skill on level D. Whereas if we see the using volume formulas on level D, it would be a lower emphasis because we're introducing that on level D. So again, the standards do straddle over many levels, but where they're emphasized is based on the content level of TABE. So if I am a math teacher, it would be a good exercise to have all the blueprints side by side so that I can see where these descriptors are being introduced and where they're being emphasized at a high level. I'm going to jump back to the PowerPoint real quick, and hopefully this is opening up for everybody. And I did have a couple of slides, so I will send these slides out to Jerry so he can get them out to everybody. So there are a couple of slides that have the blueprint examples in there for everybody. I do have a couple of examples of some sample questions as well for TABE 11 and 12. The first on the left-hand side of the screen is a sample question from TABE 9 and 10, level M for math. And we see that it's an applied math sample set of questions. And we see that we have a sample of a cable bill on the top of the page. And then there's some questions related to that cable bill. The first question is, what's the correct amount in the balance due box? So you're doing some basic tabulations for that. If I compare that to what level L for TABE 9 and 10 is going forward, we see a much more increase in the rigor of the question. First sample question on the right-hand side of the screen for level M of 11 and 12, we see a diagram, a rectangle, and it says, what's the area of the rectangle written in the simplest form? And so we see the fractions Some students may try to reduce that into decimals to try to help that out, and that's probably not the best approach to that question. So again, understanding area, understanding fractions come into play with that question. If we look at the second question at the bottom, it has two boys that are mowing lawns. The question is, in which equation does the box represent the number of lawns that Kevin has mowed? So it is a straightforward solving for X algebra question. And again, level M, based on the new standards, introduces that solving for X algebra type of question. And again, using the blueprints would be a great resource to understand where that's being emphasized for the test. I'm going to go back to our website and just to show you a couple more resources that you can use. There is also on tabetest.com, under that purple logo, a whole printout of sample tests that you could use in PDF format. So under the sample practice item link, there is a list of sample items, and I'll scroll down and show that for each level of TABE and each content area, you can print out a sample test for each content area. So I'll look at the math level M this time. This is the same one that we looked at just now in the PowerPoint. But the very first sample question we see is a new type of question, which is the gridded response. Gridded response used also in high school equivalency, but we see here the question says 10 plus x divided by 2, and it asks evaluate the expression for x equaling 4. So 10 plus 4 divided by 2, obviously the answer is 12. In a traditional multiple choice question, I may have answers of 8, 10, 12, and 14 in an ABC format for multiple choice. But in gridded response, I'm provided a grid of bubbles, and I would bubble in the 1 and the 2 on the bubbles. As long as I bubble them in sequentially, I get credit for that. I cannot leave a gap. I cannot bubble in the decimal at the top or the fraction at the top for this specific question, but I could use a gridded response for a decimal answer or a fractional answer. So again, new questions for TABE that haven't been on the TABE test in the past, but these practice tests that you can use are great. I will scroll down on this practice test, and you'll see that a little bit farther down, questions, at the end of the practice test is the answer key. So if you do print out this practice test for a student, just remember that the answer key is always the last page. So you want to remove that before you hand it to a student for that purpose. Again, that was on tabetest.com under the purple logo under the sample practice items link. I'll come back to our PowerPoint now. I'll talk a little bit about TABE Online and the Insight Engine. Many programs in Indiana use the Insight Engine for both TABE and Task, and we are working towards adding TABE Class E into the Insight platform. So students throughout all adult ed programs will become very familiar with the Insight platform. When a program uses TABE Online, it is two separate systems. There's the student or the examinee side, which is accessed through the Insight icon that's installed on a testing computer. And through that icon, students can log into a test or they can log into a tutorial. And it is a good practice for the students to take a tutorial ahead of time. If you are using TABE Online today, you have access to this tutorial inside the Insight system, but all programs have access to this tutorial through our public website of tabetest.com. I will jump over to show that link in a moment as we go through the link for tabetest.com. Oops. Let me jump out of that real quick. Go back to our PowerPoint here. And I'm losing control of my mouse. Sorry about that. There we are. So let me go back to where we were with the PowerPoint, and on tabetest.com, you'll notice the third link down on the left-hand side says Online Tools Training. If you are using TABE Online today, if you're not and you just want to look and see what it looks like, you can go to this Online Tools Training. It is available to anybody to go to the website and use the Online Tools Training for TABE 9 and 10 or 11 and 12. If you are accessing the tools training from the public website, you are instructed to use the Chrome browser. If you're using it from within Insight, you don't have to worry about that. So there's a link here to go ahead and click to continue. And we see what this was a normal view for our students' view to log into the testing window. And here are the tutorials that are available. As I mentioned, the TABE 9 and 10 tutorials available, or we see the tutorials for reading, math, and language. Within reading, math, and language, we have tutorials for EMD and A. And then also within EMD and A, we have the standard or the audio version. TABE 11 and 12 on the online platform now does support text-to-speech, so a student can use headphones and go through the assessment with an audio version as well. I will open up the standard version real quick for us to walk through and look at a couple of other sample questions. When you log into the tutorial, it provides the username and password for you right above the login boxes. So that information is right there for you, and I'll type that in there. And the difference between paper and pencil testing and online testing is that the students walk themselves through the directions. So the student is welcomed in. They're told what tests they're going to be taking, which happens to be the level A sample. And then they're going to go through some directions that are specific to the online tools training. They're told about the help screen. On the next screen, they're told about the pointer and the flag button. Again, if you're in the paper and pencil assessments, as a proctor, you're reading instructions to the student. On the next screen, they're told how to navigate forward and backwards and how to end the test. And then the final help screen is how to use the highlighter, the sticky note, the magnifying, and some of the other tools. And the last window is a technology check screen that says if there's 3 circles on your screen, your computer is operating correctly for you to go ahead and begin an assessment. When we launch the assessment, it will open up to the sample questions. These are the same sample questions that you can print off in the PDF format. So again, students can get very familiar with the sample questions. They are also the same sample questions that are in the front of every TABE test that a student will take, whether it's TABE online or paper and pencil. So if you're looking for some efficiencies, having a student do these samples ahead of time is an area that could gain a little time during the testing process. There are programs that email this link out to students that may have registered ahead of time so that they can do these samples from home. Other programs do these sample questions in class. It's kind of a free we owe a computer literacy class, letting students have exposure to the computer lab, going through working with the computer and the mouse, because you have the ability to go through the tutorial. Up in the top, we have the number bar that shows how many questions there are on this specific reading tutorial. I can go through and use some of the icons. The first one is the cross-off tool. The second one is a highlighter. If we use the highlighter, we can highlight parts of the text. We also have a sticky note. If we want, wanted to use a sticky note, we can take a note and say maybe 2 + 2 = 4, and we want to save that for later. We can have that there. We can actually magnify the screen if we need to. Maybe this is better for a math portion of the test. And we can turn all that off if we need to. We can turn the highlighter off. We can turn off the option eliminator as well. As I scroll through these sample questions, I could flag a question for review at the bottom if I wanted to. I can mark a question that I've answered, and attempted an answer, and then go ahead to the next question. I'll answer that question as well, and I'll move forward to the next question. And now I'm at question number 3. Question number 3 has the essay about buying local. If I scroll through the essay, it's a 6-paragraph essay. On the right-hand side of the screen, there's a page that says, how does the author provide effective support for the main idea of the article? So it's a standard multiple choice question. This I can answer, and then I'll go ahead and move to the next question, which is still part of question number 3, but it's part B. And we're now seeing it says, which detail from the article best supports the answer to part A? This is that evidence-based selected response. These are the two-point questions for the reading test of TABE 11 and 12. I can go ahead and mark an answer for that, and I'm going to go backwards to part A of that question. So part A was, what's the main idea? Part B was, what's your evidence to support your answer to part A? 2-point question. I need to get both part A and part B correct to get both points. If I get part A correct and part B incorrect, I get 1 point. If I get part A incorrect, but part B correct, I get 0 points. You do not get credit for getting the evidence correct for the wrong main idea. So again, there are 0, 1, or 2 points possible on the evidence-based selected response, but I have to get both parts correct to get 2 points. I only get 1 point correct if I get part A correct. I'm going to jump to the end of this tutorial by paging forward to after question 7. And just so you'll see at the end of question 7, it's a student is brought to a summary screen, and you'll notice that there are check boxes in the first question 1, question 2, and the 2 parts to question 3, but no check boxes the rest of the test. So I supplied an answer for question 1, 2, and 3, but I didn't answer anything the rest of the test. I also flagged question 1 for review. I can jump back to any of these questions. If I just click on the item and go back to that question, I can go back to my grid if I need to. If a student decides to end out of the test, they can end by clicking the end button, and then they have to hit submit their scores. So if you have a student that says they accidentally exited out of the testing system in the middle of a test, just be aware that they accidentally hit 2 buttons to get out of that, and they confirmed twice that they wanted to exit out of the test because they hit exit and now they hit submit to end that test. So generally, students don't exit out of the test by accident. To recap, the online tools training and the practice items are both on the public tabetest.com website for you to access and use prior to testing, so that students get very familiar with the types of questions that they're using. The blueprints are also there. And I'll jump back to our PowerPoint to talk about some more resources. For those programs that might be using paper and pencil testing, it is still available. For TABE 11 and 12, we do change the scoring process. We no longer use the expensive Scantron scanners and the TestMate software. In the past, a Scantron scanner was $4,000 to $5,000, and the TestMate software was about $3,500. So it's about $8,000 to $9,000 investment to scan answer sheets. We've switched to image-based scanners for TABE 11 and 12, and on the screen are some examples of some image-based scanners and the prices that I've seen on some online office supplies sites. So much less expensive, and there's also no software to purchase any longer for TABE 11 and 12. Programs that choose to do paper and pencil testing and choose to scan their answer sheets will receive free access to our TABE portal to connect their scanners to the portal and scan answer sheets to the portal for free. These scanners are image-based scanners. They do copy the image, transfer it to our servers through an internet connection, and then the scoring happens through our servers. The couple of requirements for scanners are that they are dual read scanners, so that means they read both sides of the page at the same time, and that they're continuous feed scanners, which means that they have a tray that the paper gets loaded into. They're not a flatbed scanner with the big sheet of glass that you might have on your home scanner. And then they're also Twain compliant. Twain compliant is an industry acronym, and it just means that that scanner can connect to the internet. If I have a scanner and I plug it into my computer, it will automatically connect to the TABE portal when I open up the TABE portal. We are looking at adding support for office copy machines. Those office copy machines that do scan and have continuous feed capability can email or save files. That the direct connection is the point that they're working on. So that's something that's being worked on in our development team. We're also looking at adding support in the future so that you could take a cell phone picture of your answer sheet, much like you can do with your checks within your bank, to take a picture of a check and that deposits directly into your account. One great feature about scanning and scoring for TABE 11 and 12 is that when you do scan something into the TABE portal, it goes directly into the same database that's used for TABE Online. And that will now have all TABE data together. And we are beginning to work with state data systems to start transferring data into those data systems. So we're doing some pilots now that will eliminate the need to hand enter data into data systems by having some nightly transfers of the data. So we'll continue to work with Indiana to work on that technology side within the data system of Indiana. I want to look at the TABE reports, and I'll pull up a sample report here in a moment, but just looking at the reports that are available. And again, these are the reports, whether you scan or are doing TABE Online, you have access to the same information. The most used report is the individual profile report, and I'll show an example of that in a moment. The individual profile report is a detailed look of a student's testing occurrence. An individual portfolio is a summary of a student's tests over time. So if I tested in January, I tested in July, and I tested in November, I would use a portfolio report to see a summary of all three of those, but I would use a profile report to look at the details of one of those occurrences. We can also look at a locator report if you're testing with the locator. And then, as I mentioned, we have some export capability. One is a bulk export, and think of that as a kind of a state level export. We can send a nightly export file into state data systems, and that's what we're working on through our pilots. But we also have two new resources, a roster report and local exporting. So you have the ability to put a group of students together in a roster report and get a summary of those students. And you also have the ability to have local exporting, and I'll show you a quick example of that as we move forward. Some things that we are working on is to improve the diagnostics for TABE 11 and 12, and we'll talk about that as we go forward. And we also want to continue working on a workforce report that will link TABE college and career readiness skills in with the Department of Labor's ONET competencies. It's a kind of a lengthy process because there are a lot of ONET competencies to try to align to the college and career readiness process, but it's something that we want to work on for the future to have a new report added to the system that may help students. You may be working with students on some career exploration activities, and a workforce report will align their TABE performances into workplace skills. So I may align, yes, I'm interested in going into welding or law enforcement, but I see that my math skills, which on this workforce report show that are needed to go into welding, are higher than my reading skills, which are needed to go into law enforcement. So maybe that makes my career pathway decision easier, and that's what our goal is with this workforce report. So looking at a sample of a TABE profile report, we see on the screen this report, the student at the very top. I'm the student, Mike Johnson. I've taken TABE 11, ran this report back in January, and in the middle of the report, under the first gray section, we see the content areas of reading, math, and language. We've added the testing dates. If you're using TABE 9 and 10, I know that was a struggle, that the test date was not there with the content area. It is there for all TABE 11 and 12 reports, so you have the date of the test on the report. So I took TABE reading and math I'm reading on the 11th and math and language on the 12th. I have different levels. And now I see in the middle of that first section the number of points. There are 56 total points on the reading test, and I obtained 40 of them. Remember, there are more 2-point questions on level A than there are on level E or M of the reading test, so I will have more possible points when I look at this report and compare it to a different student. I see the number of questions that I attempted, my scale score, my standard error measurement, which if you don't recall from 9 and 10, the standard error measurement is the plus or minus factor that you can apply to a scale score. What we typically just use that as a reference point. Low standard error measurement numbers mean a higher validity range for the scale score. So having a standard error measurement, in the teens and the low 20s is a great number. When we start getting close to 100 or over 100, that would mean that we're getting to those out of range areas. And then we have the NRS level on the far right-hand side. One score that's not there is the grade equivalent score. I will show a resource where you can get grade ranges aligned to your scale score here in a moment. But grade equivalent scores under 9 and 10 were a very statistically fuzzy score, and under 11 and 12, with the change of the standards and the straddling of the standards, they are even more kind of fuzzy, and our research scientists have removed them because they are not a valid or a reliable valid score. So we do not have grade equivalent scores on the report, but we do have a resource for you if you need to have an alignment for that. At the bottom of the report, we see that the objective areas, and we see on the left-hand side, key ideas and details, craft and structure, integration of knowledge and ideas. These are the pie charts from the blueprints that we saw earlier. So the left-hand side of the bottom of the page is the pie chart, and then we can see how many questions were within each pie. So 18 questions related to key ideas and details on level A of TABE. I have received partial proficiency of that objective area or that domain. In TABE 9 and 10, that proficiency, or we called it mastery in TABE 9 and 10, was measured strictly on a percentage basis. Under TABE 11 and 12, we've changed to be much more scientific and used the item response theory and looked at the weight of that question, or the weight of these 18 questions. So if we think of this a little bit more detailed, and I am not a research scientist, so I'm not going to get too statistical on you, but this is level A of reading. Level A covers 9th to 12th grade reading at the college and career readiness level. So that would cover 4 years roughly of content. Key ideas and details, 18 questions. Some of those are going to be at the 9th grade level. Some of those are going to be at the 12th grade level. Statistically, some of those are easier. The 9th grade ones are easier than the 12th grade ones. If I only answered the 9th grade questions correct, I should not and I would not be able to get to full proficiency, even if I had a majority of the 18 questions correct. So I have to have the weight of the questions to get to the proficiency level. So we have algorithms built into the system now to measure through the item response theory the weight of each question. So now you see the proficiencies are based on an actual performance and not just on arbitrary percentages of that. As we go to the new page 2 and page 3 of this report, page 2 is a detailed look of the skills. The left-hand side of the page is again the same as the blueprint. So we see key ideas and details, craft and structure, integration of knowledge and ideas for reading. But if we go to the right-hand side, we see now the skills that make up those areas. So drawing inferences, identifying main idea, support main idea, summarize, describe relationships between events. That those skills all make up key ideas and details. If we look down below under the math, we can see number and operation and fractions. We can see on level M math, we cover evaluate fractions, add fractions, multiply, understand decimals, and divide fractions. So those are the skills, depending on my proficiency, that I can work on to improve my proficiency. As I mentioned earlier, we are working to improve these areas of the, right now, these skills are the skills that are listed for the content of the test. So level A, we want to make these more specific to the students. The challenge that we have is, if we go back to the previous screen, at the bottom of the slide where we see 4 questions related to geometry or 4 questions related to expressions and equations, what the research scientists have challenges with is giving more detail on those 4 questions than what was on the slide, because there's only 2 skills listed under there of knowing geometric shapes. And they're always challenged with teaching to the test or teaching to the standards in the skills. So we are working to increase the diagnostics for TABE 11 and 12 on this report to become more specific to the students. So you will see some changes in the future. We are also adding new resources. It will be a whole new reporting portal where you will be able to set some matrix for the reports themselves. So if you wanted to, for example, show me all students that are at or below a certain level on a certain standard, you could set that matrix and pull up that kind of information through the portal. So a new reporting portal for TABE is being developed, but we want to take some steps before we get to that new portal and increase the diagnostics on this report. I'm going to jump back to our website real quick, and instead of going to tabetest.com, I'm going to go to our Insight portal. And many of you that use TABE Online have seen this screen before, but I will log into the portal under my username. And just to point out a couple of things is that if you are using TABE Online or Task Online, you'll have the same access to the portal. So you'll notice that I have access to TABE and Task, but I'll go ahead and click the TABE program. And then up on the top under all applications, I am a TABE Online user, but I'm also a scanning program as well. So if I continue to scroll all the way to the right, you'll notice that I have an icon for local scanning. So this is the same portal whether I use TABE Online or local scanning. If you are a program that just is using paper and pencil and does not use TABE Online, you will have the same access to this system. You just might not have some of these other icons or menu options in the middle of the screen. You would just see local scanning and report delivery, for example. TABE Online customers that also might scan at some additional sites would see all of these similar to what I have. But I'm going to open up the report delivery screen just to point out a couple of the changes and the new additions so everybody's aware of them. Oops, let me do that again. Under the report delivery menu, most often you've been going to the on-demand reports. That's where you find the individual profile or the individual portfolio. But about a month and a half or 2 months ago, we added the on-demand extract and the on-demand roster. So again, whether you're using TABE Online or the scanning system, you have access to all three of these. On-demand extract lets you export out into an Excel file your testing data, and on-demand roster lets you create a roster report for tests that have been taken. So just to know that you have additional resources. You have the on-demand reports that lets you run your traditional reports, which are the profile, the locator, and the portfolio. But then you also have the extract and the roster reports that are available as well. I'm going to jump back to the website and finish up with a couple of resources. On tabetest.com, we've been going under the purple logo and showing you the links that were under the purple logo. But this time I want to go up under the top menu, and there's a resource tab at the very top of the screen. Under the resource tab, there is a section for TABE 11 and 12. If we go under that 11 and 12 drop-down arrow, we see that there are a couple of several resources that are available. If you want to have a detailed brochure, there's some of that information there. There's a slide about the testing times that we saw in the PowerPoint, a same link to the practice items and the blueprints. But there's also a quick start guide for TABE Online. So if you're new to TABE Online, you can access the quick start guide right from tabetest.com. There's a sample of the same report that I had on the screen on tabetest.com. There is also training videos that are available on tabetest.com for TABE Online. These are short videos for individual steps within TABE Online. So if you wanted to register a student, you can watch a video about registering students. If you wanted to run reports, you can watch a video about running reports for that. There is also a certification process if you want to watch a 90-minute webinar and take a short quiz at the end of that webinar and pass that quiz 80% or better, it will print a certificate of being a certified TABE administrator. So we have a self-certification process posted to the website. I'm going to go look at the one link at the top here in the middle. It's called TABE 11 and 12 Scale Scores. And this is the white paper that I talked about for the grade equivalent scoring guidance. So this white paper is posted to tabetest.com. There's a couple of paragraphs about the report, but then I'll scroll down to the first chart, which is the reading chart. We see the 6 levels of the NRS on the left-hand side, where those NRS levels cross over to the K-12 levels. So level 1 of the NRS covering kindergarten to first grade, level 6 of the NRS covering 11th grade to 12th grade, and then the kind of breakout of the 12th grade levels, and then the TABE scale score ranges. So if your program had a reading requirement in the past that said you had to have a 9.0 to enter or exit a program, under the 11 and 12 format, the scale score range would be between a 576 and a 596 for that 9. Now, we're not telling you any longer that a 9.2 is a certain number or a 9.6, but we're saying within the 9th grade range is between a 576 and a 596. Now, obviously, the 576 is near the lower end of the range and the 596 near the higher end of the range. But you can then set that scale score for that requirement that you have locally. I would caution that, again, this is based on TABE 11 and 12, based on the new college and career readiness standards. So what was a 9 under 9 and 10 is different than what is a 9 under TABE 11 and 12. You may want to review the content, look at the blueprints to understand what's being covered in those higher levels of TABE for that. One other thing that I want to cover, and I'm going to go back to a TABE report to talk about this, and I don't have it as an example, but I'm going to mention it real quick, is out of range scores. Out of range scores happen on TABE 9 and 10. They are continuing with TABE 11 and 12, but they will continue at a much less significant occurrence for TABE 11 and 12. Out of range scores only happen for TABE 11 and 12 on a student that performs very poorly on a specific test. So I will use an example here of reading. So on my reading test, there was 56 possible points for this level A test. For this example, I believe a student has to have below 10 points out of the 56 to be out of range. There is no out of range on the high side. So there is only out of range on the low side. We have capped the scale scores on the high side. So students can only go so high on their scale scores. What you might see going forward are plus and minus signs next to their scale scores. Plus and minus signs are visual indicators for you as a program administrator or as a teacher. If I see a plus sign next to a scale score, it means that that student has reached that ceiling of that particular level of TABE, and there is no growth available for a post-test at that level. So if on my example on the screen, I took level M for math, if my scale score was a 584 plus, that means if I took the 12M, there would be no growth available. I would have to take a level D to show growth. So again, a visual indicator to let you know that a student that gets a plus sign needs to move up a level on TABE to show growth on their NRS levels. On the opposite side, if I see a negative sign or a minus sign next to my scale score, that means that that student was close to being out of range. It is still a recordable scale score, but it's a visual indicator for you as a teacher that that student was nearly out of range, and they're going to likely be in your educational program for an extended period of time. They are most likely not a fast track student. They were at the very low end of the range. Their growth is going to come after they make a full jump. They're going to have to go through the full level, which might require a full training period versus, let's say, somebody that needs a brief refresher and might be considered a fast track student. So again,
hey Mike.
Yes.
Yeah, this is Matt. Hey, we're gonna have to get on with our call. I've got 4 questions for you from the field.
Yep.
And then we're gonna move on with the rest of our call. So they're only supposed to take an hour total.
I'm sorry. Sorry about that.
No, it's all good. Okay, so the first question I have is, why are formula sheets offered to task takers but not for TABE 11 and 12?
So in TABE, the formula is provided in the question if it's allowed and not part of the measurement. So if you go through the sample questions that are on the website, you will see that there are some questions that have formulas built into the questions, and those are questions that the formula is not being measured on the question. But if it's needed, if it's allowed, and it's built into the question for TABE.
Okay. Okay, the next one is, are the answers to OTT in the blueprint link?
The OTT does not have the answers, but they are the same answers that are in the blueprint link, yes.
Okay. All right, next one is, on the portfolio report, can you add the points obtained?
In the portfolio report, can you add the points obtained?
Mm-hmm. Like, so you said that on the math, they could score 2 points for this question, the total number of points that they get?
It's all done for you automatically when you scan or when you use TABE online. So all the point calculations are done automatically. If you're scoring by hand, you're given directions on how to calculate those points.
Okay. And then the last one, can you show the locator report? We've got somebody saying that they can't get it to work.
I will. I can, if you want to send me an email or give me a call, I can get you connected to our support team to get that to work.
All right, we will take care of that. And also, everybody, just so you know, Mike called in from Alaska today, so he's been up since, I don't know, what time is it your time?
Well, it's now 7:15, but we started around 5 this morning.
So thank you very much, Mike. Thanks again. Seriously, that was some great information. We're going to get all this information out to the field too, so we're going to continue on with our call. Again, thanks, Mike.
Thank you. Sorry for the time.
Oh,
no problem. Thank you very much, Mike. Scott is here this morning, and he's going to share some information regarding TABE 9 and 10, 11 and 12, and task and some comparisons that he has done.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Let me forward through all of Mike's slides. All right, so to be conscious of your time, I'm just going to go through this really quick. So here at the central office, we compared TABE 9 and 10 scores with TABE 11 and 12 scores, primarily grade equivalencies. And to do that, we looked only at people who took both TABE 9 and 10 and then later took TABE 11 and 12. And then we also compared student NRS levels as scored on TABE 11 and 12 with their task scale scores. And to do that, we just looked at students who had taken TABE 11 and 12 and passed all 5 of the task subtests. So here's the really quick version. And we'll send this out, but if you look at these charts, this is the TABE to TABE grade equivalency. So we compared math, language, and reading. For math, we see an average change of negative 2.98, so really -3. So what that means is on TABE 11 and 12, on average, students are scoring 3 grades lower than they were on TABE 9 and 10. For language, as you can see up here, it is -3.26, and for reading, it is -3.21. So that roughly evens out to about a 3 grade level difference. Just so you guys are aware, I mean, I think we all intuited that TABE 11 and 12 was a little bit more difficult, but here's some data to kind of back that up. Now moving on to our comparison with TABE 11 and 12 task takers, task passers. We found that, at least in Indiana, the average NRS level as scored on TABE 11 and 12 of task passers was NRS level 4. That was also the median. So, and then you can see up here the scale scores. So the average task scale score was 559, and the median was 555. So keep in mind that for reading, writing, and math, the passing scale score is 500. And for reading and writing, the honors level scale score is 560, and it's 580 for math. And here I've got these tables to show you for each one of we just looked at math, reading, and writing because there's an actual TABE subtest or a part of TABE that matches to these subtests, not so much for science and social studies. And again, we'll send these out to you, but you can look here. This is math, and you see the average TABE 11 and 12 NRS level is going to be about 3.8 for passers. Reading, average TABE 11 and 12 NRS level 4.3. Writing, 3.9. So right around 4. Again, that's the overall average. So with that, hopefully that was quick, and we'll send this out. If you have any questions, you can email me, and I'll turn it back over to Jerry.
Okay, thank you very much, Scott. Let's turn to measurable skill gains and high school equivalencies. Going to the next screen, this is the state NRS table for this year, 2018, 2019, from enters. It's very early in the year, but we already have approximately 8,500 students enrolled. Nancy is here, and she's going to go over very quickly some specific numbers so that you're abreast of where we are this year, and then she is going to provide a snapshot of last year. Nancy?
Thank you, Jerry. Good almost afternoon, everyone. In September last year, 2017-2018, there were just over 8,000 students enrolled. Last year's enrollment data was pulled on September 12th. Jerry pulled this year's data on September 28th. At the very least, our enrollment is holding steady or perhaps up just a bit. The same holds true for contact hours. At the very least, we are about at the same or slightly up again from a year ago. We are running slightly behind with measurable skill gains. On Friday, Indiana was at 21.28%. In 2017, adult education was at 22.09%. Regardless, remember the state is using a new assessment, Table 11 and 12. The good news is that initial results are very close to a year ago. Our state target for 2018-2019 is 64%. Compared to this time last year, we are on target for the number of HSEs. We assume the entry levels would be lower for students with the new TABE 11-12, and our assumption appears to be holding true. So far, the majority of ABE students fall into Level 3. Level 2 was the next highest. This is with about 40 hours of attendance on average. Perhaps this pie chart will illustrate the changes with placement levels. The majority of ABE students, 69%, entered with skills at levels 2 and 3. Level 1 and 5 and 6 make up only 14% of the total. Level 4 is 17%. Now let's compare to the previous year. Blue represents program year 2017-2018. Salmon is program year 2018-2019. While there are less than 9,000 students with entry levels at this point in the program year, the majority of learners are falling in NRS levels 2 and 3. Let's turn to the previous program year, 2017-2018. The state report was submitted to the U.S. Department of Education, Office of Career, Technical, and Adult Education on Monday. Here is a snapshot of Indiana. Overall, as a state, we are down in enrollment by about 576 students from the previous program year. For several months, we believe we might be down in the number of HSEs attributed to Indiana adult education programs. In the end, we actually increased the number by nearly 120 diplomas from 2016 to 2018. That's really good news. It will be interesting to see where Indiana falls in relation to other states as final tallies are reported. Let's hear some applause for Anna and the increase in the number of HSEs in 2017-2018. As we reported during the last several months webinars, we were up 6% points as a state in measurable skill gains from a year ago. Our total MSG gains stand at 63.78% for program year 2017-2018. Our target was 60%, so congratulations everyone. Also mentioned in previous webinars, adding distance education to existing programming really helps. Indiana's final numbers on NRS Table 4C for MSG was nearly 71%. The number separated before any measurable skill gain was down from the year before. We finished at 32.37%, nearly 4 percentage points down from a year ago. Let's continue to work on reducing the number of students who exit without gains. ABE levels 1 through 6 were under 31%. ELL levels 1 through 6 were at 38%. Turning to integrated education and training, including IELCE, there were 1,433 students enrolled. This was just over 5% of our total state enrollment. Just over 1/3 of our students reported being employed when they entered into the program. 41% of our students were unemployed. The number of students with a high school credential or higher increased. The final number stood at 29.31%. Nearly 25% of our students in 2017-2018 were in correctional or institutional settings. The actual total was 6,132. These students perform well when it comes to measurable skill gains. The percentage was nearly 70%. Now we're on to Maryland. Good morning. I hope you have received emails from either COABE or IAACE around this, but we are really excited to announce that nationally the budget was approved at the federal level, and there is a $25 million increase for adult education. We don't know what that will mean for us at the local level, and we won't until the spring, but the positive is, since this has already been signed, we should get those numbers sooner than we got them last year, so we'll have our federal numbers. Unfortunately, we're also going into a budget session for our state dollars, so we may be may take us a little time to know exactly what our state dollars are, although we anticipate getting the same amount that we have in previous years. And then finally, I hope you all also received the new infographic that our marketing folks did for us. You can see the statistics there. I'm not going to read this to you just in respect of your time. If you have any questions about this, this is based on PY16 numbers. We will update this once all of the PY17 numbers for the other states are entered and we can do a comparison. So this will get updated, but it's good for you to use now with your legislators, and more conversation around putting something specific to your own programs on the reverse of this. Thanks all.
Hey guys, it is me again. So I just want to talk very briefly about the Indiana Adult Education Online Only Distance Education Grant. We sent that out to you guys, or opened it up 3 weeks ago or so. And the anticipated start date, so we had exactly one applicant. Thank you very much for that one applicant. The anticipated start date for that grant is going to be as soon as we can finalize things, because it was an excellent application, in October, so that's this month, but we're still working on as soon as we can get everything upstairs here cleared, that will start.
Okay, thank you very much, Scott. Lance is here, and he's going to just briefly talk about monitoring again. Just as a reminder, we've covered monitoring in large degree over the last 2 webinars. But Lance, take it away.
All right, good morning. This is a review of the slides that were presented on last month's call. So I'm going to go over them very briefly. You can see that in section 1, we discussed performance accountability. We're looking at your intake forms, release forms, adherence to the assessment policy. Okay. Let's see. Make sure I'm on the right slide here. Do programs follow the instructional hours to administer pre and post tests? Identify appropriate forms of each test to use for post testing. We're looking at do programs enter data into enters at least by the 10th of each month? Do programs review and fix errors by the 10th? And what is the process to resolve problems? Do the programs have procedures to verify accuracy of the data collected? We're looking at Section 2, fiscal. Have all required federal state financial reports been submitted? Were the submissions timely? Are you within your percentage caps? Are the costs allocated for maintenance of effort verifiable in the grantee's records? And we're looking at what income is being reported and how it's being spent. The main thing is, are all administrative costs necessary, reasonable, and allocable? Also in fiscal, is the grantee reporting one-stop infrastructure costs? Is the staffing adequate for the grantee's current education responsibilities? And can the grantee provide evidence that the staff keeps time and effort charts to document? Next one. Section 3, local leadership or professional development. We're looking at how is PD delivered, shared, and tracked? How are the funds being utilized? Is there a process for continuous improvement? Section 4, monitoring. Does the grantee have a process in place to monitor internally? Does the grantee have a process in place to monitor sub-award recipients? We're looking at, does the grantee provide internal staff, including sub-award recipients, with training and technical assistance for any issues? We're also looking at cooperative arrangements that the grantee has with other agencies, institutions, and organizations. Are services in alignment with the local workforce development plan? Does the grantee meet performance targets set by the state? Section 5 states, do the grantee and sub-award recipients maintain an inventory of equipment purchased? Do you follow the retention schedules for program records and student files for a minimum of 3 years? Does the program collect signed high school exit forms for students aged 16 to 18? Does the program use Indiana Career Explorer with each student? Also in Section 5 states, what processes are in place to monitor sub-award recipients if applicable? Are provider staff credentials in compliance with the Adult Education Qualifications and Development Policy? Do the grantee and sub-award recipients monitor data quality? At what frequency does the grantee review plan versus actual expenditures? In addition to me, the monitoring team consists of Jennifer Montgomery and Roy Melton. Jennifer is the AEC for the Southern regions. Roy is the AEC for Region 4. No AEC will monitor their own regions. As a reminder, these are the same questions that were on the statewide call from last month, and the protocol has been posted on Amplify AE under Program Policy and Guidance. If you scroll down to the Adult Education Monitoring Protocol, you will have a list of the questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Lance. Jessica Gray is here, and she's going to talk about some Work Indiana updates. Jessica?
Hey, everyone. Let's see. Here's a snapshot of our to-date data for Work Indiana. This was polled Friday, so it's a little not up to date, but mainly up to date. Currently, we are at 20% of our current goal for enrollment. We should have approximately 450 enrolled at this time, and we have 366. I am showing that there are some programs that have no or very low enrollments for the 18-19 year, so please make sure that you are entering in your data on a timely manner, Another reminder that we have our Work Indiana celebration coming up in November. Thanks to everyone who has helped us search for potential volunteers. We have selected our candidates and will be reaching out with more information to secure those secure the participation of those students and employers. But we look forward to seeing everyone there that can make it. Again, thanks to everyone who submitted comments and feedback for the policy. The new policy has been finalized and is available on our website. Student record retention, site monitoring, and employer reimbursement grant sections have been added to the policy. For those of you who have been awarded funding for the employer reimbursement grant, please submit a report outlining your program's intent to utilize this funding by October 15th. This report can be brief, 1 or 2 paragraphs. It should explain where you are in utilizing the funding, how many students have begun a class, and how you are engaging with employers and any roadblocks that you have ran into. We would like to be able to share this with all grantees, any successes or roadblocks that have been encountered, so everyone can begin utilizing this funding as soon as possible. To go a little bit more in detail about the employer reimbursement grant, the purpose of the ERG is to support employers and adult education sites in partnering and creating classes that will help employees of the employer to obtain their HSC or HSC. The working in grantee can reimburse the employer for sending eligible students to an eligible AE provider. The AE provider may also be a working in grantee. This process, especially for those that are working in grantees and AE providers, will require detailed fiscal tracking. Please keep in mind that the ERG funding is being drawn from the working DINA bucket of money and not the AE bucket of money. Eligible ERG expenses are expenses incurred for eligible employees and the HSE training class. These classes can be conducted at the AE site or at the employer site. Reimbursement can be requested for the program costs not to exceed $500 per eligible employee. These expenses may include task testing, supportive costs, facility, and materials. An employer partner may wish to send their eligible employees to the AE site and pay for the task test and transportation. For each student who obtains their HSC, the employer can request reimbursement for those expenses. Or another example, an employer partner may request that the AE teacher come to their site to train. The employer can pay for the instructor's salaries, materials, equipment, and then request reimbursement for each eligible employee. Listed on the screen are a couple additional examples and then list of eligible expenses. The employer reimbursement form is also listed on our website, which gives a little bit more detail on the full process of the ERG grant. If you have any questions or need clarification on anything, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Jessica. Our professional development team is here. They will have a very short report. Dan?
Okay, for those of you who are still on the call, we'll go very quickly. Nancy, Jose, and I are still the state PD team unless something changes. Next slide, Scott. We did get our contracts back, and of the 5 that we submitted for state contracted PD, we had 4. And we luckily had a number of people, great people to apply. We will have a new teacher training, more and evidence-based reading, addressing racism in the classroom, integrated education training, and IET workforce education initiatives. And information will be coming out soon as to when each of these opportunities will be offered. Next. Save the date, December 14th. The directors have been asking for some time having director meetings, and we are going to have them. And then the first will be December 14th. We'll have 2 subsequent ones before July 1st, and all of them will be located in Indianapolis. This will be an opportunity to have all directors around the state to come together. At the same time we have these meetings, we'll also have the PDF meetings. There again, our PDFs have been asking to meet and network a lot more, and this will be the opportunity. So the PDFs and directors will have separate meetings this time for these meetings, and it'll be December 14th. All of you were asked to put into your local PD plans NRS training. And I had an individual from a region saying, when's this going to happen? Well, it's ready and it's up and going. The NRS actually is offering courses. And you'll see the website there. And Scott, if you can go to the next slide. Oh, here's some examples. These are the different modules they're offering. And what's nice is you have the descriptors and you actually have the amount of time. So if you have your teachers to actually go in and do NRS training, you can actually give them professional development points based upon what's here. So this is ready and up to go, so have at it. That's it.
Thank you very much, Dan. Matt and Brent are here. Do you have a report?
Very quickly, NRS reports are done. They were submitted Monday, and you can do your snapshot and be looking forward to an email coming out about training dates coming up in the next few weeks. They won't start in the next few weeks, but the email will come out, and then we'll get those dates. That's it.
Thank you, Matt. Roy is here. Roy is the AEC in Region 4, and he will do the IAACE report to conclude the morning.
Thank you, Jerry. I'll be very quick. The COAID virtual conference will be Thursday, October 25th, and Friday, October 26th. Again, the COAID virtual conference will be October 25th and October 26th. IAACE has paid for all members to attend for free. See your September member news for details on how to register. Registration is required. IAACE 2019 conference. Call for exhibitors and sponsors. If you know someone who is interested in exhibiting at the conference, please go to IAACE. You are invited to the next conference meeting, which will be October 12th, which is next week on Friday. IAACE president issues a challenge. She challenges each of you to make an employer contact. Invite them to visit your program or go visit them. Let them know how your AE program can be a resource to their company. And that's it.
Thank you, Roy. And thank you for your patience this morning. This has been a marathon webinar. Our next statewide call will be on November 7th at 10 a.m. Again, thank you for your patience. We covered a lot of information this morning. Please have a great afternoon.